Hello, YouTube. It hasn't been too long since I did a book haul, unless you call 1 month too long. For my channel, that's not a terribly long length of time, but I just thought that I would do another one. This time, I want to look through all the books that I've gotten this month. So it's not like one giant book haul. It's more like a bunch of tiny book hauls that add up to what would be one giant book haul. I just wanted to do another book haul, basically. So let's get right into it. And this one's a corker. This one is The Absolute at Large by Carol Chapek. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know if I am or am not, and I don't really feel bound to figure out the pronunciation. But anyway, this is part of a series of science fiction classics, so-called, which I am ashamed to admit I do collect. Yes, I do love this, it's not a great cover. I mean, they all look like this. They all have the weird maroon font on white that often gets faded. This naked spaceman up here. But I do admit that I do sort of appreciate the weird quality of it. And I want to collect all of them. So, but that wasn't strictly the reason why I bought this one. This is a very interesting sounding story. The Absolute at Large stems from the pantheistic premise that God, the Absolute, is present in all of nature's forms. In the story, Marek, a scientist, invents a machine, the carburetor, which harnesses the full energy of the atom, but in demolishing it, releases the pantheistic God that it housed. The machines are mass-produced and put into use. The people in touch with the machines are given to performing miracles of second sight and healing. From this develops a religious fanaticism that involves the nations of the world in deadly conflict. Civilization is almost destroyed until the last carburetor is demolished and normalcy returns to the world. It's a bit of a spoiler, but spoilers aren't that bad a thing. It gives you a real good indication of what this book is going to be like. I've heard only good things about Carol Chapek, although the only experience I've had with him is a short story that I read in Modern Masterpieces of Science Fiction. No, not modern. Regular masterpieces of science fiction, which I covered in my summer wrap-up video last year, and I really did not like that story at all. But I still have faith that this will be an interesting book because that is a really, really intriguing premise. It was written in 1927. It's part of this series, the Hyperion Classics of Science Fiction series, so, I bought it and I had to give it a look. This, by the way, was purchased at the one bookstore. Well, there's two of them right next to each other, but it's in Grand Rapids. It's called Redux Books. So I purchased this there, and the next book is from that same trip, except this was bought at the other bookstore right there. There's two bookstores right next to each other, and this was also an amazing find. This is Armor by John Steckley, which I had been looking for a long time. I first found out about this book by the interesting cover here, which I've seen in a lot of... Hold on, let's open up the cover a bit so you can see the full picture. There's a spaceship down there, airdropping troops a la Starship Troopers into a massive horde of insects. And right here, there's a giant insect fighting this guy who's swinging the butt of his gun at it. I see this art reprinted on sci-fi accounts on Instagram and on social media all the time. But I found out that the book was actually pretty good. I had it recommended to me. From my understanding, it's it's kind of like if the Forever War and Starship Troopers were sort of mashed into a blender. It's military science fiction to its core. Apparently, it has a lot of battle scenes and also a lot of much more focus on the military stuff and a lot of Joe Haldeman style commentary on the military and why war sucks and all of that. In any case, I'm super excited to read this. At that same bookstore is Argus Books, by the way. That's the name of the bookstore, Grand Rapids. They also had some of these trading cards. You find these trading cards for cheap everywhere. They're definitely the kind of thing that collectors thought would be the big thing in the 90s, back when collecting started to take off. Collectors just bought whole boxes of those, and they never appreciated in value, so nowadays they're just being sold for like a tenth their original cost all across America. But these are actually kind of cool. These are some of the Frank Frazetta cards that I got. There's the original cover for Conan the Avenger right there before it got edited for the final book cover. So you can see Conan looks totally different. He's a lot more monstrous. He's almost more like a goblin than human. And the chick he's trying to save is a lot more voluptuous. Yeah. Really toned that down for the final cover. Next here we got a, what is this? Like an elephant and a girl. Number 65, Swamp Demon. In the 70s, Frazetta did 3 covers for National Lampoon, an interior cover for Dragula, a comic book parody, and a back cover illustration for National Lampoon's Encyclopedia of Humor. You see, the trivia on the back of these cards never has anything to do with the cards themselves. Anyway, there's King Kong, there's like Tarzan, there's a Native American, there's the iconic poster for Fire and Ice. So as you can see, this is pretty cool, because it's sort of like having a deck of cards that are just all the cool pieces by y'all's favorite artists. The only real problem being that sometimes the art isn't the original canvas is not in this like aspect ratio, so you might have to crop some of the picture, or in this case like look at those beautiful, okay, the camera's not focusing, but like look at the beautiful pixels on this card right here. I don't think you can see that, but in real life this card is pixelated to high hell. It's terrible. All the other cards look nice in comparison. There's like Dracula and Frankenstein like way on the side here. I doubt that this matches the original aspect ratio of the frame. And there's, yeah, and I also got another one for the Brothers Hildebrandt. So there's a bunch of pictures here, and I was kind of surprised because normally I think of the Brothers Hildebrandt as mostly just Lord of the Rings artists, but there's a lot to see in here, including this scene from Pinocchio, which is a recognizable scene from the book, not from any of the movies, where Pinocchio tries to warm his feet by the fire and ends up burning them off. Has to beg Geppetto to make him new ones. I skipped one there. What is that, Peter Pan? Yeah, that's Peter Pan, all right. So yeah, those packs cost me about $1 each. I got 3 of them, so those are pretty cool. Now, yeah, sorry for that diversion, but back to books. Okay, well, after I went on that trip, I got a bunch of books as gifts. These are gifts for my birthday, actually. So I received these from my family. My dad works at a, like a, just like an archive in the library, not to get too specific, but he often receives like book donations and things like that, and sometimes somebody donates like a whole trove of old molding books that are, not really worth keeping either because they're falling apart or because nobody particularly wants them, they're not particularly collectible. Among those are a bunch of books by Washington Irving. So of course he decided to pass them on to me, sort of a freebie. These stories by Washington Irving here are sort of the main feature in terms of volume. They're the oldest books. Let's open this one up here. Feel the pages. They bend in like 3 different directions. They're so wavy and they feel powerful yet light in the hand. And there's so many of them. Yeah, I really think about the sensation of page flipping way too much. But these are mostly collections of short stories and nonfiction, so I'll definitely read the short stories, I'll just say that. Right here is a completely unknown book named Rosamond. I can't find anything about this online. Looking through it, it seems to be a sort of a collection of short stories. And I think it's just like stories for girls from like the 1800s, so I don't know. Every once in a while I'll get the itch to read something completely unknown. And I don't mean completely unknown to like book talk. I mean something like it's just like number 1 million in a series from like the 1800s. So maybe this will be it someday. The next book I got is A Girl of the Limberlost. Something of import. by Gene Stratton Porter, famous Indiana author. This book used to be loved. I don't see anybody talking about it anymore. Look at that cool illustration. Yeah, I've been wanting to read this book. I haven't read it yet, but someday I will get to read it. And after I read it, I want to visit Gene Stratton Porter's house up here in Michigan. She has 2 houses, one in California and one in Michigan. I want to visit that one. Apparently, it's a very pastoral story about a young girl growing up in Whereversville. Well, in the swamps of Indiana. Here we go. The Last of the Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper in this somewhat old... Is that mildew, perhaps? I don't know. But in this pretty cheap old book. So I have another edition of Last of the Mohicans. And then the last book is perhaps the most interesting of the bunch, and it's also the one in the worst condition, possibly because it was the most fun to read compared to these other ones. And here we have The Beasts of Tarzan by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Now, I am very lucky to have this book. Not that it's like super rare, but I mean, it's got illustrations in it. It's got the old original edition, like, that's not very good. That's not very good at all. Okay, well, yeah, this book is basically dead. Like, if you brought this to any used bookstore, like, they would not accept this at all. But I'm typically a very careful reader, so yeah, I'll definitely read this. Definitely give this a read. I'm sure the book will be happy to be experienced genuinely one more time. Okay, so putting that box back down, let's move on. This next one is a bit of a doozy. I bought this one at the St. Stanislaus, like a church, like permanent garage sale. It's a church over here in Michigan. No, Michigan City, Indiana, not in Michigan, Indiana, which has like a permanent sale. It's a thrift store that supports a church. And they have a really good book section. I'm not quite sure what it is that makes the book section so good, but they sell a lot of good books for cheap. This is no exception. Jules Verne, Paris in the 20th century. I love Jules Verne. He has a love of humanity. He is imaginative. His writing is not always the best, but his description, perhaps it's just the density of proper names and scientific lingo, but I always feel like he evokes the environments really well. Even when the prose itself is not super excellent, I always feel like I'm sort of breathing in the setting that he's invoking. And this is perhaps the only novel he ever wrote that took place in the future. Like the far future, where like everything's different. And it was never published. This is a lost manuscript, lost for many years, recovered only recently, re-released in this beautiful new English translation by Del Rey, and I got it for only $3. And a bunch of cigar smoke. You can still smell some of it. Yeah, so when I said that this book was a doozy, I did not just mean that it was a good one. I also meant that when I bought it, the whole thing smelled like cigarette smoke so badly that opening it just once, like here, like, I could just taste it. The cover is sticky and all that. I looked up online how to treat it. I found some book librarians talking about how they have to deal with this every day in the library. Like, people returning books in this condition that weren't in this condition previously. Monsters. Like, that's destruction of property right there, as far as I'm concerned. Even if you're not, tearing pages out of the book. If you're imbuing it with a permanent odor, especially one that could trigger people's secondhand smoke allergies, then that is destruction of property. That should be finable, but I'm not sure if they ever will get fined. So I put it in a bag with some dryer fabric, like 2 pieces of dryer fabric, let it dry for a couple of days, spritzed the cover down, wiped it off, inside cover here, 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 and everywhere. I just gave it the works, and now it smells like cigarette smoke and dryer fabric. But the cigarette smoke smell is reduced by quite a bit. So I'm hoping that eventually that will sort itself out and that I can read it without much problem. Maybe I'll wear a respirator. The next two books I got from a Goodwill. So this is actually a Goodwill book haul. There are some decent books that I found there. Most often the books you find at Goodwill are kind of trash, but you can definitely find something interesting. Here it is, The Illith War by Stephen R. Donaldson. Now, epic fantasy is definitely something that I've skipped over just entirely. Well, modern epic fantasy, like proto fantasy from like the 1900s, I can do with a bit of that. But modern fantasy, like fantasy after the year 1950, I just have not looked at all. This is one, however, that I thought sounded really interesting. In case you don't know what it's about, I believe it's about a general, like some kind of strategician who dies and comes to life in the realm of Illith. You know, he isekais his way there. And as luck would have it, this epic world is being attacked by some ancient evil which awakes once every 200 billion years to wreak havoc upon the land. And wouldn't you know it, he's the only strategician in this entire world. Every other war they fought with this great evil, they say, oh, we just meet them in that giant plain down there and we sort of fight it out. But this guy says, no, you should be taking advantage of terrain. You should be trying to flank the enemy. You should be trying to do this and that. And I promise you, we will be able to beat back this unbeatable evil once again. Even with our reduced technology or reduced equipment, we'll be able to destroy them. So, yeah, that's why I picked it up for like a couple bucks. There's something in here. It's like an old receipt, I think. Yeah, can't tell what that's from. Anyway, this was a very interesting find, but not as fortunate in some respects as this next find. Published by Amazon, can you tell? Early English Romances in Verse, done into modern English, Romances of Love by Edith Rickert. Now this is a word from the 20s. As you can tell, the badly facsimilated Google Books thing leaves the first page right here is in the book. And as a result of that, the entire book, page numbers are on the inside. Because you see what I mean? Like the Google Books scan of this book that this like AI robot publisher took this from, the pages were like offset by 1. So like this page is supposed to be over here and vice versa. Now the page numbers are on the inside. And that's a little annoying. But in all other respects, this is a very interesting find because I do love reading like medieval literature. And this is a collection of early Middle English romances, which is fantastic. I mean, I don't typically find them out in the wild, and there's a bunch in here that I haven't read yet. Hold on, let's see which ones they are. Contents. Floris and Blanchefleur, which I don't think I've read. Sir Orfeo, which I have read, the Tolkien translation, but maybe this is from a different manuscript. Lay of the Ash, I don't think I've heard of that one. Lawnfall Miles, which is Landfall, I've read that one a couple times. I actually did read this one recently, and it was a little bit different. The Earl of Toulouse, which I don't think I've read. Sir Degervan, which I don't think I've read. The Knight of Courtesy and Fair Lady of Faguiwell, I don't think I've read that. The Squire of Low Degree, haven't read that. And notes. So, yeah, this is a very lucky find. You see I got my bookmark in here because that's the one that I wanted to read next was Lay of the Ash. Hold on. Yeah, well, I don't know. It's just in a weird spot. Anyway, the next place I went to is the Griffin Bookstore in South Bend, Indiana. Amazing bookstore. Lovely place. Such a nice owner who's so knowledgeable and friendly to talk to. He's read a ton of books. You know, all the books on the shelf, he's read tons of them. You can actually talk with him about those, or the authors. Down in the basement, there's used books. In the first floor, I mean, there's tons of wargaming stuff and board gaming stuff. This store is, in fact, a D&D and role-playing store of the first water. It was opened in like 1976, 79 or something like that. Like, this was either right before or like right when D&D was starting to become a thing. So like maybe like when it first opened, it was probably just selling like Avalon Hill board games and stuff like that. So it's really a remarkable store to exist, and it's still been in business since then. Same owner and everything. But upstairs, one thing that I really love them for is they have a giant selection of Dover books, just all front facing this whole wall, about the size of this horribly ugly collection of plywood. And that, oh my god, I should genuinely take this out of here. I'm sorry about that. Maybe I should restart the video. I'm not going to restart the video anyway. But, you know, the size of this is what I'm trying to get across. All front-facing Dover books, all so obscure. It's not just Great Expectations and G.K. Chesterton and stuff. Well, G.K. Chesterton is remarkable in himself, but there's books by William Morris. There's books by H. Rider Haggard. There's like Erewhon by Samuel Butler. There's a little bit of this. There's a little bit of that. There's all kinds of old fantasy books, old sci-fi books, books on philosophy, all kinds of weird stuff you don't see very often. It's very clear the owner's stocking this because he wants to appeal to a certain taste. And that taste is me. So, as to say, I got Led in the Mist by Hope Merleys, which I have never read, but it is one of these forgotten fantasy novels written in about the 20s by Hope Merleys. It seems remarkable in that not only is it a piece of proto-fantasy, but it seems to be deal a little bit in magical realism. It's not like the kind of fairy tale type book you would expect. Well, I'll get not quite magical realism, but it does have a very realistic sensibility. These characters feel real. They feel lived. It feels like the kind of pastoral English countryside book that you would expect from this era, except it's fantasy imbued. Anyway, that's my understanding of it. I'm sorry if I'm completely misrepresenting the book. I should really shut up before I start saying these kinds of things, because these are really just my first impressions. I'm sorry for doing that. But it's also remarkable in that it was written by a woman. That's one thing. And this was one of the books that was sort of resuscitated in the 70s when, you know, people like E.F. Blyler and all those sorts were just I don't know what kind of sadomasochist games they played, but they just combed through endless catalogs of random stupid books from the 18 and 1900s in order that every once in a while they might find a diamond in the rough, such as this one. Now let me read a blurb from the back to describe to you what the book is. Led in the Mist is a flourishing town and the capital of the Free State of Doramer, located at the confluence of two rivers, the Dapple and the Dull. Bordering to the west and said to flow from the Dapple is Fairyland. Doramer law has banished Fairyland inhabitants and forbidden all fairy things. But someone is smuggling fairy fruit into the state, causing addiction, fits of delusion, and possibly moide. Hope Merleys' 1926 novel is an enchanting narrative intertwined with folklore, the magical realm of the fairy folk, mysterious intrigue, and rural superstitions. A delightful discovery for lovers of fantasy. And that is what I hope to get when I read this book. Can you imagine? This was sitting on this shelf, new, at the local bookstore, released by Dover, new release, forgotten book from 1927. This is why Dover is my favorite publisher out of all of them. Penguin can go suck an egg. I love this stuff. Anyway, at the same bookstore, I also picked up Wyland, or The Transformation by Charles Brockton Brown, which, I mean, it's a gothic novel. It seems interesting in its own right. But what I find interesting about it was that apparently this is some of the first American, like, works of fiction that exist. I sort of tend to think of American fiction as just starting with James Fenimore Cooper, but Charles Brockton Brown was there in the 1700s, which is kind of insane. Let me read you some from the back. Fiction did not flourish in early America, where it was generally viewed as a useless or demoralizing pastime. Before Charles Brockton Brown, America had no professional man of letters. Wyland, his first novel, appeared in 1798. Among the romances by anonymous young ladies, it was a pioneering effort to create a serious American literature. Good thing he left all those ladies behind. And now his book's getting republished, and theirs aren't. Dude's rock, I guess. In a land without castles or ghosts, Brown found the suggestion for a gothic tale of terror in the strange case of a farmer in Tamhannock, New York, who believed he had been commanded by angels to kill his family. This really happened. This is what the story is based on. He provided a sensational plot to interest all readers, while writing a novel of ideas that explored the moral constitution of man. The elder Wyland, a mystic, builds a temple on his estate for his private devotions. One night he is killed by a mysterious flash of light. Lightning? Who knows? His children live on happily with their companions, apparently not missing their father, using the temple as a summer house. A mysterious pagan temple, let's just use it as a summer house, sure, until they begin to hear unearthly voices. A charming vagabond joins their circle, and the father's fanaticism overtakes the mind of the son. In its time, Brown's writing presented a searching and original study of mania and remorse, foreshadowing Poe and Hawthorne. Wyland. I mean, if you're not interested by that, then you don't like Gothic fiction. Anyway, these next two books that I got are a bit of a different thing. I didn't just walk into a store and tuck them under my shirt and then leave without paying, which I didn't do for any of the other books, but I could have done. They're actually, my mother brought them home because one of our friends of the family wanted to put them in the little free library, but decided to pass them along to us first. So I scooped them up. One of these I might put back in the little free library because I'm not sure I really want to read it, but it's here. And that book is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick. I'm really torn on whether or not I want to actually read this, because Philip K. Dick, I've heard all kinds of things about him. I've heard all kinds of people say that he's the greatest science fiction writer of all time. And then other people say that he's only called that because he's a pompous ass. I'm not sure which side I fall on. I've never read anything by him, but I might as well read this because this is considered his classic. On the back here it says, war has left the earth devastated. Through its ruins, bounty hunter Rick Deckard stalks in search of the renegade replicants who are his prey. When he isn't retiring them, he dreams of owning the ultimate status symbol, a live animal. Then Rick gets a big assignment, to kill Nexus 6 targets, 6 of them, for a huge reward. But things are never that simple, and Rick's life quickly turns into a nightmare kaleidoscope of subterfuge and deceit. Inspiration for Blade Runner. Yeah, so, I don't know, something about that description doesn't quite grab me, but at the same time, I might just have to try it out, because maybe I don't read enough mainstream stuff. Sometimes I want to be able to engage with people about books, so I think about maybe reading something more normie that everybody knows, but on the other hand, maybe that's overrated. I also got The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert A. Heinlein. The second I saw this, I just scooped it up. I mean, no reason not to. I love Heinlein. I've read many of his, several of his other books. Mostly his juveniles, which, I put juvenile in air quote because they can really be enjoyed by anybody. They're wonderful books. The adventure is great, they often include talking animal companions and those kinds of things that sort of give the illusion that it's only for kids, but that's just a thin coating. I mean, they're challenging books for children. They're challenging for children, which makes them somewhat tame for adults, but if there's one thing that I appreciate in a story, whether it's books or movies, it's a really solid adventure narrative. This, of course, is going to be different, so I want to see how Heinlein handles it. This is a much more serious book, 400 pages rather than his juveniles, which are only about 200 at max, and sort of features let's read the back cover. It is a tale of revolution, of the rebellion of the former lunar penal colony against the lunar authority that controls it from Earth. It is the tale of the disparate people, a computer technician, a vigorous young female agitator, and an elderly academic who became the rebel movement's leaders. And it is the story of Mike, the supercomputer whose sentience is known only to his inner circle, and who, for reasons of his own, is committed to the revolution's ultimate success. So, yeah, that's clearly somewhat of an allegory for, like, the American Revolution, or a retread of it, taking inspiration from the themes of the Red Planet was a book that also sort of had a similar thing going on, and I enjoyed that book. Of course I enjoyed that book. It is probably one of his better juveniles, as to what I've heard. I haven't even read half of those, but I believe it reading it. And this one will have similar themes. That's the thing about Robert A. Heinlein. He has a lot of politics, a lot of opinions. Even in his juveniles, they come out in books like Starship Troopers, which he originally intended as a juvenile, which is kind of crazy to think about. It's basically what the whole book is. Yeah, most people don't agree with his politics. In fact, I kind of would rather not read, like, Starship Troopers out in public, just in case some person who calls himself bookish and arranges their books by color kind of clocks me as a weirdo for just wanting to read it. And but he is a smart guy who, thinks about his opinions. He doesn't just spout them out like people on Twitter do. It's interesting to sort of read his opinion on things, how he plays around with ideas such as, in democracy, should everybody vote? Okay, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but basically what I'm saying is his politics aren't really agreeable, but at least he's not stupid, which is a little bit too much to ask these days sometimes. So I'm looking forward to all that in this book. Now let's finally move on to the last one. This book haul happened today, and this was the inspiration for this very video. I went to Casperson's Books in Buchanan, Michigan, and I got 2 books, which this first one is called Beavis, like Beavis and Butthead, I assume, by Richard Jefferies, who I found out because he's the author of a proto-science fiction work called After London, which I really want to read. Apparently there is an Oxford, like, World's Classics edition of After London, which is kind of insane, but I want to find that book for sure. But anyway, when I was scanning the bookshelves, I saw, like, Richard Jefferies, like, on the side of the thing, pulled it out, and, it's Beavis. It's the story of a boy. It's one of those books that make you realize Mark Twain wasn't actually terribly original, because it's yet another bad boy story, such as a Story of a Bad Boy and other books like that came before. No, wait, this one actually came way after Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer. Anyway, my point still stands. This is a bad boy book. Beavis 1882 is one of the best-loved books about childhood, appreciated by adults and children alike. Drawing on his own boyhood in Wiltshire, Jefferies creates an ideal countryside in which Beavis and his friend Mark enjoy their adventures. Yeah, this one's London, not America, but I don't care. Free to roam around farms and a lake, they explore and learn to swim and sail, play at being savages, mount a complex battle as Roman soldiers. There's always got to be a part in these books where the kids, have a little pretend adventure. Make a matchlock gun, and live alone on an island in the lake for over a week. Kind of reminds me of Huckleberry Finn. Tom Sawyer, but that's beside the point. Richard Jefferies is not only one of the greatest of English nature writers, but one of the rare mystics of English literature, and both these elements are strong in Beavis. It is an immensely honest and practical book, honesty about the amorality of boyhood, and accurate in all of its many details of outdoor living. Beavis has had a great influence on children's literature, admired by Kenneth Grahame, Arthur Ransome, whoever that is, and W.H. Auden, among others, and is one of those rare books which creates its world so completely that few readers want it to end. Sounds interesting enough. But looking at the chapter titles, I don't think I have enough time to... Frick it, let's read the chapter titles. So we've got Beavis at Work, The Launch, The Mississippi, Discovery of the New Sea, By the New Nile, Central Africa, The Jungle, The Witch, Swimming, Savages, so they're already pretending in their little, like, adventure. Savages continued the catamaran. Savages continued making the sails. The mast fitted. The council of war. The war begins. The battle of Pharsalia? The battle continued. Beavis in the storm. Mark is put in prison, so I assume that this is more imaginary stuff. Or maybe real, but they're still probably playing. In disgrace. Visit to Jack's. Very sorry about that. Sailing. There she lay all the day. Voyage to the unknown island, so they're going to the island. The Pinta, New Formosa, making a gun, the cave, building the hut, provisioning the cave, so it sounds like a Robinson Crusoe story all of a sudden. More cargoes already. New Formosa first day, New Formosa morning in the tropics, New Formosa planning the raft, so they're still on this island. Kangaroos on New Formosa. New Formosa Beavis's Zodiac, the raft. No hope of returning. Oh, right around the third act. Something has been to the hut. That's kind of scary. The story of the other side. The matchlock. New Formosa, Sweet River Falls. New Formosa, the mainland. The something comes again. The tiger from the reeds. The trail. Voyage in the Calypso. New Formosa, the native. No, the captive. So they're still on this island. New Formosa. New Formosa, the black sail. Shooting with double barrels. American snap shooting. The Antarctic expedition, and that's the end of the book. So it sort of reads, the chapter titles make it seem less like the episodic adventure that Tom Sawyer was. I'm not sure I'm right for comparing this to Tom Sawyer, but it is a bad boy book, so I am going to do that no matter what. It sounds like it reads a lot more like a boy's adventure narrative than the episodic, like, coming to life thing. It seems like they're stranded on this island for like 3/4 of the book, and whether or not they're imagining everything, they're still, going on all these wacky, crazy, and probably life-threatening adventures. So I am excited to read that for sure, because I do like that genre. The very last book that we have to look at today, I also got this one from the same store, is Kafka, The Metamorphosis, and Other Stories. I'm not sure I even have to say much for this one. I mean, it's Kafka. I haven't read any of these. Metamorphosis, though, so many annoying people online say it's not about a guy who turns into a bug. Even though it is about a guy who turns into a bug, Kafka wrote a cohesive narrative about a man who turns into a bug. That is what the story is. You could say that it's an allegory and everything, and maybe it's as obvious as a hammer on the head. I don't know, because I haven't read the story, but I think I'm still qualified to say that yes, it is about a man who turns into a bug. Anyway, I hope the story is really good, and it doesn't just appeal to the people of painfully average intelligence who want to be smart that say that kind of stuff. This includes other short stories too, which I've heard Kafka referred to habitually as like the master of short stories. And the ones included are The Great Wall of China, Investigations of a Dog, The Burrow, In the Penal Sediment, and The Giant Mole. So, I'm excited to read this too. What can I say? $4. Penguin Modern Classic. Beautifully faded book. Nice and faded. Love that. This little like sticker down here. I don't know what that is. But, yeah, that's great. Do I dare go over all the books that I got? Let's do it. Okay, so first of all, we got The Absolute at Large. Armor. Paris in the 20th Century. We know what that's like. We know what it was like in the 20th century. He didn't. The Ill-Earth War. This. Blood in the Mist. Wyland. Sorry, wrong side out. Do androids dream of electric sheep? The moon is a harsh mistress. Beavis and Butthead. And the Metamorphosis and Other Tales. And, if I could just move this stack over for a second, I got the offcuts of some dead person's collection for my birthday. I probably shouldn't clap because it apparently comes out annoying in the audio. I'm sorry for that. But man, my hair's grease-o-rama. I was sweating earlier today. I got a shower. It's hot where I am. Anyway, I'll do that right after the video ends. Anyway, that was my book hauls for the month of July. I hope you enjoyed this really long video. I did. I got to tell you about all these amazing books that I haven't read yet, and maybe when I do read them, I'll go back to this video and think of myself as an idiot for all the assumptions that I made and all the false hope that I had that they would be any good. Hopefully that hope will be substantiated in the reading. Hopefully that hope is not misplaced. I hope all these books are amazing. But you never know. Anyway, I'm sorry for the ugly environment, but I'm going to be going back to college very soon, so I will have a new environment again soon, and hopefully it'll be cleaner than this ugly basement. Anyway, thank you for watching this book haul. I will see you again sometime soon. Thank you. Goodbye.